Welcome to the Humanergy Leadership Podcast, where we tackle your toughest leadership challenges and share practical tools to help you lead with impact. Well, welcome to this episode of the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. My name's David Wheatley. I'll be your host today, and this is season 2. So welcome to season 2. This is episode 202. But we've started a new season and we're going to be batching them a little bit differently from how we have done for the first 5 years of the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. And my guest today is a very special guest. It's part of our family business interview series. And today I'm talking with Erin Tolefree, who is the president and CEO of Baldwin Richardson Foods, a third generation family business leader. And she became the president and CEO in 2023. Her professional journey began with Baldwin Richardson Foods in 2001 as a national account manager for the company's for part of the company's business, and in the same year she led Baldwin Richardson Foods industrial ingredient business. And if you've ever got a sauce or some kind of fluid from a shop, a restaurant, it could well have come through Baldwin Richardson Foods. She expanded her role with the acquisition of an industrial products division of the Smucker Company in 2005, and was to the senior manager of national accounts. And in 2014, was promoted to vice president of sales and began to expand her role into manufacturing and the product development process. And so in 2023, she became the CEO and president, and she's got some wonderful words of wisdom to say and share about the practice of being part of a family business from very early on, and the transition into, she's kind of sort of second generation and third generation at the same time. So enjoy this conversation. Well, Erin, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And I wonder if you could start us off. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, your position, the company you're with, and the history generationally of your family business.
So I'm Erin Tolefree, and I have the pleasure and privilege of representing the third generation of entrepreneurship in our family, the second business, and today I serve as the CEO of Baldwin Richardson Foods. Baldwin Richardson Foods is liquid products. That's what we call what we do, food manufacturer, and we make things like syrups and sauces and toppings and beverages for the entire food industry for many different outlets. So hopefully, as we get through our talk today, you'll learn a little bit more about the delightful products that we have that are hopefully making their way into your office and your home. We take a lot of pride in delighting our customers and consumers with great things.
There's a lot of sweetness in there, so you're probably pulling at some of the things that I'm a fan of. So you said third generation?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that history.
Yeah, so our story starts with my grandmother and my grandfather, Joan and George Johnson, who in the 1950s migrated to Chicago. And my grandfather was working in a manufacturing plant on the South Side and had an idea, saw an opportunity, had this entrepreneurial spirit that he could make a hair care product that would be premium to what was in the market at the time and also better from a consumer perspective. He didn't have anything. So he had this idea. He had a network of people that were helping him with everything from chemistry to spaces to be able to try things out, but he didn't have the funding. So he came up with this idea, wrote a business plan, and went to a local bank and asked for a loan for $250. And the first loan officer told him that he was not only not going to grant the loan, but that he was doing him a favor, because if his boss were to find out that he were coming up with this idea, he would probably lose his job. So he went home very discouraged. And my grandmother, Joan Johnson, kind of the backbone and a strong mentor in my life, wouldn't stand for defeat. And she sent him back out the next day. He got very much the same, but on the third try, went to a different branch of the first bank and asked for $250 to take his family on a vacation to California. And he was granted the loan on the spot. And that is the beginning of Baldwin Richardson Food, or excuse me, Johnson Products at the time, and ultimately Baldwin Richardson Foods. So it's that hustle, that grit, that determination to defy boundaries and barriers in pursuit of what you want that really kind of was the foundation of our story. My father and his siblings had the opportunity to grow up at different phases as they were scaling the business. His goal and objective was always to become the CEO of what was Johnson Products. Johnson Products grew rapidly as he went from 5-6 years old to post-college. They went from being this small garage shop to the first company, African-American owned company ever to be traded on the American Stock Exchange. And in their peak, had about 60% of the African-American hair care market committed to their products. He became the CEO through a lot of different challenges and chapters, and decided that this just didn't feel like it was it. And he couldn't understand the feeling, but over time, and he tells the story, decided to pursue what else could be out there. And that is when he took the pivot into the food industry. My journey started about 4 years into it. I'm sure we'll get into a lot of the dynamics of how that happened in our conversation, but we've had the privilege of working together since 2001 to really scale what is now the third generation of our family business.
So are there still the two businesses together, or has one gone and the other you've transitioned to the second?
So ultimately, Johnson Products was sold. And it's kind of interesting because it does kind of come back into the family story, but doesn't stay for very long. They sold it to IVAX and started to invest into other things. And by that time, my father had left and already started what became Baldwin Richardson Foods. It began with Baldwin Ice Cream. A couple of years later, there was a desire to sell Johnson Products again, and some of the financial institutions that were representing the deal had reapproached my father, Eric, who I refer to him as. And he got excited, but then those same feelings of this is not it came back. And for a number of reasons, he decided not to pursue trying to bring it back private, but told that team that if they ever found anything in the food industry, that he would be interested. And just a couple years later, when Quaker Oats decided to divest of their brands, Mrs. Richardson's, Nance's, and a small food service business, they gave him a call. And so at the time, he had Baldwin Ice Cream, and that is where the name Baldwin Richardson Foods comes from. The name of the business was Richardson Foods.
And so the hair care products was Granddad's entrepreneurial growth that then Dad saw, but it wasn't enough. And when that moved on, Dad's looking for what else can I do? So the entrepreneurial spirit was obviously handed down there somewhere.
It was, and I will tell you, it wasn't apparent. So I grew up going to work with my grandfather. I grew up going to work with my father. Two very different experiences. When I would drive in from the North Shore of Chicago to go to work with my grandfather, we would enter the building of Johnson Products and ascend to a corner office that was, I think, what I imagined would be the dream office as I grew up in my career. And through the day, my sister and I were able to take on work there. So my entrepreneurial lessons started as early as I can remember, back to maybe 6 years old. And our jobs for the day would be pencils and getting people's files straightened up. And we even were able to end our day in the test salons, really learning about products and experiencing what it's like to be a consumer. Conversely, when we closed the day out and we would go to work with our father, his office was right in the middle of the production floor. No fancy walls, only plastic sheets, for safety and cleanliness. And we got to see kind of the two different worlds.
Oh, that's a fascinating, it's like doing your MBA at 6. You got that experience of seeing the very traditional hierarchical setup and a very embedded, more kind of part of the team leadership
Yeah,
style.
and I think At the time, we didn't realize what we were seeing, but we saw kind of the differences between the two leaders. Of course, my grandfather had his time in the plant and manufacturing and formulating and doing all the things that at that stage my father was doing. My grandfather, though, was a big ideas person, an entrepreneur at heart that knew how to assemble the right group of people, motivate them and toward a common goal, and have this shared sense of reward that was both aspirational and real at the end of the day. My father had a lot of those things, but he also, because of the success of the business, had the opportunity to get a formal education, and not just any education, but was able to attend Babson College, #1 school for entrepreneurship, and come back into the business with a different set of skills to really take it to its next phase of growth.
And it's fascinating when you look at dynamics. Usually 3 generations, there's a lot of story goes with it. But what you're really telling me is the first 2 generations were really both first generation.
In many ways, yes. They both have came in with, I think, a founder mentality. I think for me, as I look at Generation 3 and how we are taking the business forward, we aren't founders, but the values that Gen 1 established are still alive and true, and part of the recipe for success that fuels, our growth and achievements to this day.
Right. And so Gen 1 sets it all off. Gen 2, your father pivots into this world and expands and grows into the food business. You're at 6 or 7 hanging around in these places. Was it your destiny to go to work there? Was that an expectation?
I would never say it was an expectation. It certainly was a desire, and maybe it's seeing is believing, and it's what I knew. And so I think I didn't come back to the point I was going to make earlier, but all I knew what Johnson Products was growing up, and what I saw was attractive to me. So I wanted to learn more. I wanted to be in the environment, and I did envision myself one day taking a seat at the table. So when my father made the decision to leave Johnson Products, which was, what we knew, it was scary. There were a couple of months that I recall, and I was getting ready I was in high school at the time. So thinking about college and what was next, and I see someone who I woke up every day and saw go to work my entire life, sitting on the couch, bringing things like ice cream and other food brands home every day. I didn't understand it. Now, reflecting and looking back, I know that he was plotting his next move. He was having that quiet space to think through, what was that future, that calling that kind of came to him, and then leveraging some of the lessons learned from the Johnson Products day. How could he take a position that was premium in the market and something that consumers would really desire?
Right. So I semi-joked about you getting your MBA by the time you were 6 there, just in real practical help. In some ways, you got it all the way through to those teenage years where you're seeing 2 different leaders operate in different ways and bring different styles, and you're really there next to them learning this real time.
Yes, my MBA comes from the lessons of living through 2 entrepreneurial journeys with my grandfather and my father, and then in the 20 years of scaling Baldwin Richardson Foods. It's been a continuous chapter of growth and learning.
So then you go to college, you come out of college, and was it straight into Baldwin Richardson, or was there a requirement to go somewhere else?
So we didn't have the kind of governance and forethought about what the next generation would look like at the time that I came out of college, and the business was very new. Baldwin Richardson Foods actually became Baldwin Richardson Foods while I was in college, and so I had the opportunity to do internships during the summers just to learn the business, both at Baldwin Richardson Foods and other food companies. My father and I have always had a kind of a coaching, mentoring, father-daughter, and that obviously evolved into a professional sense type of relationship. So on the night of my graduation, I had two paths that I was considering. One was to go to a very large food company as part of a leadership development program, and the other was to take the marketing and PR track for some of the larger brands in the food industry. And as I was seeking advice from him to figure out which one I should take, he put a third offer on the table, which I was not expecting. And it's just interesting. I think one of the things I've learned over time is, especially being somewhat of a type A personality, you can have a plan, but it only helps you to stay focused for what is inevitably going to be the unexpected. And so at the time I was graduating, he was losing a member of his team that represented the largest customer that Baldwin Richardson Foods had. And there was about a 3-week transition. And so my work at Baldwin Richardson Foods unexpectedly started 3 days after I graduated. And we negotiated with each other. He said that if I gave him a chance, that he promised he would invest everything that he needed to help ensure my success. And I told him that I would delay accepting the offers because I had until August to make the decision, and we would look at it as an internship. And if it worked out, then this is great. And if it didn't, then I helped him through a period of time that he needed support. And I think 2 weeks in, probably way sooner than that, I knew I was where I was going to be, even though I expected to go somewhere else and get the experience to feel really that I could come in and have some level of success and experience under my belt.
It's surprising how often I've heard that, the next generation wasn't necessarily lining that up, but it just all of a sudden it happened, and next thing I'm in the company doing something significant and learning rapidly. And I love that idea of, hey, let's agree to have a short internship, and if it's still working, then we'll carry on. So
Yeah.
then your evolution within the organization, you're now the CEO. So at some point you transitioned there, and Dad handed over the whole reins.
So my journey has been one where, as I look back, it was not linear, and I wouldn't change anything about it. And I say that because while I was in it at every phase of change, it felt uncomfortable. And I've gotten to learn over time that there's real growth that comes from that discomfort, whether it's I don't like the way that it's going or kind of the unexpected learnings along the way. So my journey is I spent the first 10 years in the organization being able to represent and learn every single one of our customers. I was on the commercial side leading first sales and then innovation and marketing. And I think that was a great way to start because it got me very well connected with value proposition and what do we do to continuously grow with our customers in ways that are going to be relevant for the long term. There came a point in time I guess about 10 years into my journey where to move forward in the organization, I really needed to learn the operation and learn the mechanics of how do we make all these great opportunities happen and how do we do so profitably and in a way that our customers feel is excellence. So I took a 2-year assignment, well, what was a 2-year secondment to move to New York. And similar to what I just told you about when I started my internship right after college, I kind of knew 2 weeks in that this is where the heart of the business was. We, at the time, had about 200 employees that were making the magic happen, so to speak, every day. And I just intuitively knew that if I wanted to get to a place where one day I was going to lead the entire organization, that I needed to understand operations. I needed to take tours in finance, and ultimately over the next 12 years, worked as an individual contributor and with varying levels of leadership across every function within the organization.
Oh, so that was the second part of your education, then, if you like, is I'm going to work everywhere, and that way nobody can question what I know because I've actually experienced it.
Yeah, so John would tell you that the way that I wanted to pursue that journey was to have a matrix and say, okay, this is the experience that I need to check off and keep moving through it and assessing where we are. I will tell you, not one of those transitions occurred in that way. In a business where we're growing from a very small organization to firmly in the mid-size, there are many opportunities where process needs to be built, where things need to be broken and fixed, or where, any number of things happen. And so with the exception of the last two, from chief operating officer to president, president to CEO, those transitions were brought about by circumstances where there was a need. And that's something over time I had to really learn to get comfortable with.
So you saw, or there was a need, but you saw then the opportunity for you to expand your understanding by taking on that need. And is that something, as you think about family business, you've earned the position at the top?
Yes. From day one, walking in the door, no one knows you. The only thing they know is your last name or your bloodline. And so while I wasn't full of wisdom walking in day one, the first thing I knew is I could not come in this building or any building we operated in and call my father dad. So day one, he became Eric, I became Erin, and that has served us well for a number of reasons, including making sure that there are boundaries on our professional relationship that don't transcend into our family relationship. So come back to that. But I think in general, one of the, family principles that we've all adopted and embraced, not written in a book anywhere, is that we have to perform at the highest level. If ever there are two people in a race and it's a tie, then we lose, because we represent the brand, we represent the values, and we represent the expectations. And so that drives a level of, at times, pressure, but I think in a very positive way to show up in ways that we would want to see others.
So if you're family, you have to be 10% better than the competition,
Yes.
at least, which is,
Yes.
It's an interesting rule, isn't it? Because then that puts a bit of pressure on, but it also means it's obvious that you were the right choice.
Yes. I mean, the thing is, I learned very early on, I can go into a room and think about or be paralyzed by what other people think, or I can take that same energy and pour it into the work that needs to be done and let the results speak for themselves. And I can say that the latter is definitely the way to go.
Well, I think that's, as we're talking about family business best practices, the route into a family business when you're not the first generation is always interesting. And it sounds like you've absolutely earned that. But I love that rule of, if you're not 10% better than the person next to you, they're going to get the job, as a simple rule to push you to be more than your name.
Yeah, and I found it to be very helpful, because at each phase, when I took on more responsibility, when people would say congratulations, most of the time they would say, "Oh, I thought that already happened," or "It's about time." And in many ways, that's a really great thing, because it means that, they aren't wondering, well, what does this mean? Are we going to change? Does this person have the capability? All of those things are kind of fully baked because of what they've already experienced. And so a lot of people in my peer group and different groups and different family businesses find rules and expectations like that to be somewhat unfair. I think that they've actually been very healthy in our organization.
Right. It's because it's healthy, not just for you, but everybody else then sees the work that you've put in, and they're all surprised that you weren't elevated to that position some time ago, kind of thing. That's a much better way to do it.
And they're comfortable and focused.
Yeah. So I want to pull on a thread that you alluded to there. One of my questions that I sent you beforehand is, what are some of the best practices that you use that allow you to work together and still go to Thanksgiving? Because you kind of alluded to this, some very strong principles that keep business from the family life. Obviously, Eric being Eric is one thing. What are some of the other things that have kept that healthy?
So I think we just hit on two of them. So for me personally, and I didn't have a family at the time that I started, but I knew that I valued the relationship that I had with my father. And I didn't need to have a lot of experience to realize that the grass wasn't always going to be green. The sun wasn't always going to be out. Things were going to happen personally or professionally. So I think being able to have that concept of a separation between what the work life and what the family life looks like has really helped us, because as you can imagine, working together in a family business for over 20 years, I think what has kept us in a great place is that we are, and when I say we, my sister also works in the business, and she and I get to partner in leading into the next generation every day. The three of us have always been united by a common vision. At the same time, all three of us are very different people. We have some similar things in our hustle gene, what we call it, our competitiveness, our desire to do great things of impact when we win, but our approach to how to get there isn't the same. And so when we know that there's that separation, that means that our family and our business relationships are safe from kind of what infiltrates either side of it. Mm-hmm. And because we want the same thing and we are bought into the vision, we're really comfortable with the debate and the conversations that have to happen to make sure that we take the best of whatever the three approaches are to do the right thing for our people, our customers, and our community. And that has never failed us.
Which suggests somewhere that between the three of you, your egos are very healthy and kept in check.
You know, I've never thought about it that way. I'd like to believe that's true.
Okay, because I was going to ask you, how do you do that? Because, you know, usually it's one of those things that trips people up is when your ego gets in the way, I deserve this, I'm better than, and yet maintaining that balance where the three of you actually say, I'm curious and open and I'm willing to listen and move on the back of your perspective, irrelevant of the fact that I'm the CEO. I think that shows a level of either solid best practice or very healthy ego.
I think at the end of the day, we respect each other. I can look at Eric, I can look at Kara, and vice versa. And we all see that we're better together. Right. No one of us takes all the accolades for the things that have happened. And so if you know that, no matter what a situation brings, and the emotions that come with it, nothing is all bad. And right. So we used to have a rule, which we follow most of the time, for when something does happen, we think about it through communicate early and often, because when you stop talking, things get bigger and you're not resolving anything. So I would say for the most part, we have been able to stay true to that. There have been times where I know me personally, I have to really kind of pause, think about the situation in the clearest and most honest sense, my role in it and how to approach it. Because, you know, no matter what we try to do, it is personal and it is professional. And we hold a lot of responsibility every day that we walk into these buildings for making the right decisions the right way for our people, for our customers, for the community. So there have been moments where we've had to take pause, but for the most part, we don't let things fester.
So it sounds like, again, go back to you pushing your ego down and focusing on greater good. And when you focus on greater good, it makes you open to those values that your sister and your dad are keep bringing and the rest of the team keep bringing to the table. And it's not just dependent on you. So just let me flip a little bit, because you mentioned your sister, and just because I'm interested in this family business thing, are you the oldest?
I am, but if you meet her, I have to say only by 12 and a half months.
Okay, so Irish twins, I think they call that, because
yes.
I've got a pair that are like that. But and so now how was the decision made that you get the CEO job?
Well, that's an interesting one. I think the way that I would answer that is I don't feel that it evolved that way. I think over time, we recognized that we had not just different strengths, but different passions. Kara is really driven and motivated and energized by being the face of the organization, being out with customers, helping to build our community impact. And so she's in a space that she loves. I like all of those things and do them as, the opportunities present. I really love being a great operator and bringing teams of people together to do incredibly challenging things and succeeding. And so I think we've always sort of intuitively known that our paths were going to be different, but we've been committed to the fact that that's okay. And we are 1 + 1 = greater than 2.
I know there are only the two of you, or are there other siblings?
We do have 2 other siblings. So I have a brother or we both have a brother and a sister. Our brother actually took a tour in the organization. He was probably the first to bring us, I would call it the beginning of our digital transformation, way before we would have called it a digital transformation, into our operations, and then went off to get his MBA and pursued other an investment career. But interestingly, we just welcomed our first generation 4 into the business 2 months ago. And his work is really around data and analytics and supporting our strategy team.
That's your brother's son?
That is my older sister, who's not in the business, her son.
Okay.
And he did take a path of going out for about 10 years and working in different organizations. And we see benefit in that because he's able to bring best practices and a level of confidence that you don't necessarily have if you come directly into the business. So we're not at a point where we're, from a governance perspective, making that a requirement, because I never would have seen the light of day at Baldwin Richardson Foods potentially. But we are seeing
highly
great
recommended
benefit. Yes.
Yeah. And so then now you're Gen, and congratulations on Gen 4.
Thank you.
How do you manage leadership versus ownership? And feel free to share as much or as little as you want to share publicly here.
So the way I would answer that question is to say that in the beginning, and I would say up to these last couple of years, those things are very intertwined. I mean, our focus and our goal was really to grow a great business. And it takes a lot of hard effort to stage and scale with the kind of things that any business does, but what we do. So I think the challenge to really define how we might look at those two things as the same or different is really kind of a burden or an opportunity that Gen 3 will have to think about. And we actually are working today with a family institute based out of Chicago to really define what that looks like. But what I could say is we've had conversations and we recognize, just as we had a choice to come into the business, weren't expected to, weren't pushed. We recognize that Gen 4 will have those same decisions to make. And we feel that while we're building something that the next generation, should they choose, can come into, we're also completely comfortable with thinking about ownership where we have non-family leaders here as well.
Okay. So that's in evolution, if you like, as you're getting to that point.
Yes.
It's been very interesting as excuse me, well, the dog and grandkids just right there off. I apologize for any background noise. It's been interesting hearing different stories over the last 12 months of interviewing people about one company that said, if you're not in the business, you can't be an owner, for example, and buying people out. And I'm just fascinated by this dynamic. And then there's another business where somebody's an owner, but they work a couple of levels down. And so the question always comes is, are you asking me as the owner or are you asking me as this position? And because they have two different levels of thinking, it's just an interesting dynamic as you get into that conversation.
Yeah, I'm not sure that really manifests itself within the halls of or walls of Baldwin Richardson Foods today. But I would say in terms of how we have organized ourselves, we have put ourselves in a position where the family can benefit from the business, but it is the individuals that are operating in the business that have the skin in the game every day that really are in the position of being able to make the decisions.
Right. So, well, that's a nice balance of those things in my mind. And it's all too often I see when it gets down to lots of cousins own the business, but nobody works in it. That's when it becomes particularly challenging, and you end up with private equity popping up somewhere in a horrible way.
Yes. So I think Gen 2 did a great job of setting Gen 3 up for not having to deal with that. And the way that he did it is basically once one generation transitions out, they're out, and it goes to the next level. And then same thing each generation, so that we don't end up in a position where there's, I don't know, 50 different people all with competing different ideas of how best to invest the resources we have for short or long-term growth. I do recognize, we recognize that doing that in the first generation was probably the hardest to get it started and set up, and the easiest, because as we grow as an organization and as a family, there certainly has to be a lot of work and thought to be able to preserve that.
And there's a lot of research will tell you the three generations of family business, it's goes up and down again. And I object to that a little bit. And I think it's the complexity of cousins that causes problems. And so if you're solving that up front, then you're getting ahead of the game.
Yep. We've certainly seen enough in our peer group to recognize that it's not easy, and there's a wrong way to do it for sure. When you're thinking about how to preserve the ability to be long-term and grow and continue to evolve and, do the things that you have to do to stay a great business. We haven't ourselves run into that just yet, but recognize that these are some of the complexities as we continue to grow.
That's why I call it the complexity of cousins. It's you get into all sorts of things, especially if there's different age groups at the same time. So you're saying a couple of key best practices. You are all focused around the greater good, as I may put it, rather than your self-interest. You communicate early and often to try and get ahead of things and nip them in the bud while they're still small things. And you really value what each other's bringing to the table and respect. You bringing on people that you respect, which makes it a lot easier to work with them.
Yes. And I think the last one I would add is we all recognize that we are the values, we are the brand. And that's something that we have a lot of pride about, because it means that we get to shape an environment that people thrive in, and take that very seriously.
Erin, I really appreciate it. We could probably talk all day long, but I know you're very busy, so I really appreciate your time today. Any one best practice that you'd recommend to others listening that are parts of family businesses that you'd want to leave them with?
I think first off, being a part of having the right coaching and the right network around you is very powerful, because there are a lot of similarities that we all go through, and being able to leverage the strengths and the lessons learned within a peer group has certainly been powerful for us as we've continued to grow and get into future generations. So that's what I would leave with.
So find a peer group that adds value. Yep.
Yes.
And it sounded like you had an "and" that went with that.
The last part I was going to say is staying committed to the vision, because being in a family business is really exciting most days and very challenging in others. And over time, all of us ask ourselves the question of, what are we here to do? Where are we going? And I haven't really asked myself, is it worth it? But I've gotten pretty close to it during challenging times. And what brings me back is getting out of the moment and really thinking about what we're trying to build for the long term. And that's not an easy feat, but it's certainly a very rewarding one and can offer a lasting legacy.
So it's keeping that North Star clear as you make all sorts of decisions. You go through easy times and bad times. Keeping that in front of you makes sense.
Yep.
Erin, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I look forward to maybe catching up again at some point in the future.
Thank you, David.
That was the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe and visit humanergy.com for many more resources.